Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our discussion on faith-based voting in the upcoming election campaign. Today we've got Mike Kennedy with Interfaith Power and Light, who is going to be our guest featured speaker. Rachenda, would you give an introduction of our team and Interfaith Power and Light?
Sure will. So yes, so Reverend Tim Wood, of course, is our host, and he convenes the Western Jurisdiction Group of the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. You know it's Methodist if it's at least 15 words long in order to be able to say it. The United Methodist Creation Justice Movement is made up of Methodists from all over the denomination, primarily in the U.S., all different conferences that have sort of come together to say, what more can we do together to bring about change and address climate, especially within the United Methodist context, but also much more broadly in connecting with partners and learning what other people are doing in order to do better. And there's a lot of teams, planning teams, working teams, including jurisdictional teams, and that's partly here too. This particular cafe too, we're kind of celebrating as a bonus movement cafe. Dawn Lewis is also on the call, and she's a member of the monthly movement cafe team with Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt. So it's just great to be here and to be part of this growing movement. And back to you, Tim.
So, as I was saying in my introduction before Rashenda's, our speaker is Mike Kennedy. Mike manages IPL, Interfaith Power and Light's 2024 Faith Votes campaign after guiding its 2022 voter campaign. He served as director of Florida operations for MLB. I'm assuming that's Major League Baseball, Mike, but I'll let you correct me if I'm wrong. Major League Baseball's Pittsburgh Pirates, executive director of the Bradenton Downtown Development Authority, and director of discipleship and mission at Harvest United Methodist Church. Mike also coordinated the launch of the Solar and Energy Loan Fund's Southern Plus Climate Equity Accelerator in 2023. Let us pray before I hand things over to Mike. Creator, life giver, Almighty God, we are a people rooted in faith. We are a people of your abiding love. Bless this time together. Bless Mike's words. Bless our hearing, and then bless our going forth with the knowledge and the wisdom and the connections we are building. Amen.
Thanks, Tim. As you all heard in that short bio on me, I've been fortunate enough to do a bunch of different things in a bunch of different fields. The bottom line is I'm still figuring out what I want to be when I grow up. I hear that. AC can relate. Okay, maybe we're all still trying to figure that out. But in this season, I'm super grateful to be part of the Interfaith Power and Light team to encourage people with faith and conscience to vote, to express their values through voting. It's also cool to be with a United Methodist affiliated group. As Tim mentioned, in a former life, I served on our local United Methodist Church staff in discipleship and mission, and was a volunteer leader in the Florida conference. I'm joining you from Florida today, where it's about 178 degrees. Maybe a little bit less, feels like temperature. If you don't know about Interfaith Power and Light, I'll briefly tell you about us. We're a national organization that inspires and mobilizes people of faith and conscience to take bold and just action on climate change. And we work in all 50 states and U.S. territories with a broad national network of state and regional level affiliates. And some of my awesome colleagues at some of our state affiliates are with us today, and you're going to hear from them in just a little bit. And you can learn more about us at interfaithpowerandlight.org. Our nonpartisan Faith Votes campaign inspires and mobilizes people of faith to express their faithful values through voting. We believe that through the power of our vote, we can communicate our shared values for caring for our common home and expressing our love and respect for one another. And we can join together to protect our sacred earth for future and current generations. So I'm joining you today to just share with you a little bit about how we're doing that. The next few minutes, I hope, are going to be super practical. I'm really just going to show you some resources that we have available for you to do this work in your context. And hopefully there's one thing that you take away from this that you can use in your community. You're welcome to use one, some, or all. You know your community best, and you'll know what might fit or might not. So let me first tell you about our voter guide. And when I finish, I'll drop a couple links where you can get all of these items. So know that those are coming. But back in the summer, we released a nonpartisan, multi-issue, faithful voter reflection guide to help educate and inform people of faith about the big stakes in upcoming elections at every level of government. Some people ask, why does IPL release a voter guide? Well, we believe elections are a referendum on the values that shape our future, and voting is how we create a society based on our shared values. I said it's a multi-issue guide. I think there's 6 or 7 different topics or issues addressed in the guide. It's a reflection guide. It's intended to spur discussion and discernment. And so whether you use it at a kitchen table or in your congregation, at a community event, or maybe even an event or forum with elected officials, we hope it helps people navigate the urgent moral questions in front of us this election. We don't claim that the issues in the guide are exhaustive. They're not. But we do believe they provide a framework for evaluating issues in a way that prioritizes solutions that promote common good, dignity, and social justice. And at the end of each section, there's a suggested question or two to help frame a conversation around them. So it's our hope and prayer that this is a helpful resource in faith communities and other kinds of communities. Next, I'm going to share with you my screen, and I'm just going to give you a quick tour of our website where you can find all of these resources. I'll do that in a moment. The first resource that I'm going to show you is our partnership with Ballot Ready. We are providing a one-stop, trustworthy voter information platform where voters can find reliable information, accurate information about the upcoming election. And so I'm about to show you Ballot Ready, and there's a couple ways that you can use this if you want. You could simply share with people our website that you're going to get and encourage them to use it. Another way you could use this is you can ask me for a unique link to this website that will allow us to track how many people use it because of the link that you're sharing. And that might be interesting to you if you want a way to quantify your get out the vote work in your congregation or other context in terms of how many people took different kinds of actions on the website. So, okay, I am going to share my screen now. Could somebody give me a thumbs up that you can? Thank you, Rashenda. Okay, so welcome to our website. Again, you'll get these links. This is a place where you can, actually, I'll just test drive it. Type in your name. You don't have to provide your email, but you can if you want. Okay, I'm going to type in my address here in Florida, so I expect that all of you will be sending me Christmas cards this year. That's me. Always good to make sure it's in the right city and state. I can click there to sign me up for email updates from the IPL affiliate in my state if I want. It's available in English or Spanish. We keep it on English, and I click Get Started. And it takes you to a site powered by Ballot Ready called the Civic Center. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit. You can see on the right hand of the screen, it's giving me important dates and deadlines about elections here in Florida. I can come here and I can register to vote for the first time, or I can update my voter registration. if I've moved, for example, or if I've changed my name, or I can just check that my voter registration status is still current. So there's been a slew of voting laws passed recently where sometimes people get kicked off the rolls. So it's always a good practice to make sure your voter registration is up to date. People can pledge to vote. Over here on the, people can request a mail ballot. Down here in the second row, folks can meet their elected representatives at every at every level of government, pardon me. And then these two boxes are grayed out right now. They're going to become active here in about a week or two. And this tool is really designed for the get out the vote phase of October into November. But these tiles will go live and people can find out how to vote. They can make their plan to vote, picking a date, a time, and a place of where they want to vote. And then they can also research their ballot. They'll be able to see not just the top of the ticket election, but their entire ballot, learn about all the candidates and referendums on their ballot based on the address that they gave, and do some research about those issues and those candidates so they can vote informed. We like this because it's delivered by people like you who are trusted messengers, and it's a one-stop shop where people can do everything they want and need to do to get ready to vote. And our role, if we're a trusted messenger to somebody, the best role we can play is just providing reliable, accurate information to people in this era, unfortunately, of a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So never discount the importance of your role as a trusted messenger in your community in delivering reliable and accurate voting information. Okay, next I am going to show you a couple other things. So here on the resources for faith communities link, you can learn more about Ballot Ready and how you can use it in your faith community. We also encourage faith leaders, clergy or lay, to be preaching about the importance of voting through the lens of faith. So A Matter of Faith is a resource document with message starters, prayers, litanies, etc. We also have released Politics in the Pulpit, which will keep you within the legal guardrails as a 501c3 about what you can and can't do as a nonprofit organization, as a congregation. We probably all encounter sometimes congregational leaders who might think, well, that's an election. We can't get involved in that stuff. And this resource is designed to give people the confidence they need to legally and effectively, in a nonpartisan way, encourage their people to vote and encourage the community around them to vote. We also have a couple of other resources, a how-to guide for congregation-based voter information booths that can be, in your congregation, out in the community, in your neighborhood. And then we also have a resource on how to do candidate forms, and again, how to do all these things in a C3 non-partisan way. I'm going to share one other resource with you. We are encouraging people to become a poll worker and protect and safeguard and shepherd democracy in their community by signing up and getting trained to actually be an election worker in your community. In many communities around our country, there's a shortage of these heroes, these election workers, and it's a great way for people to serve their community by serving as a poll worker. So I think I will stop there. Like I said, I wanted to just equip you with some resources that you could use, and hopefully there's at least one in here that will help you in your community this election season. So thank you for your interest in this, and thank you for all the good work that you're doing. I'm going to turn it back to Tim, I believe.
Mike, thank you. So Mike gave a great overview of how a church in a holistic way can become involved in motivating people registering people and getting them out to vote. We'll get those resources out to you afterwards. And with that, we're going to go on to, I believe we've got Melanie Beikman with Arizona Interfaith Power and Light next. Melanie, would you take it from here?
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, you guys can skim my bio in the chat. So yeah, I am the director, Melanie Beikman. I'm the director with Arizona Interfaith Power and Light. We bring faith communities together to care for our common home and work for climate justice. And Mike told you about some of the tools. I'm going to kind of set the context for how and why we're working on voting in the upcoming elections. AZIPL started in 2009 when a group of clergy realized that what was missing from the environmental discussion was the faith voice. And so now we are an organization that works with congregations. We work with green teams or earth care teams. In Arizona, we like to call them SAGE teams. And we could spend all of our time on energy efficiency and helping houses of worship go solar, and we do some of that. You know, individual actions are important, they matter, and congregational actions more so because of the example that they're setting for their members and for their neighborhood. But civic engagement is even more important because we need to address the systems that have created the climate crisis that we're all living in. And in the book, The Big Fix, Hal Harvey and Justin Gillis write about going from being green consumers to green citizens. So households can adopt solar or drive an EV, but we have to focus on the policies that will create large-scale change. And so the good news is that the U.S. has made some progress on that front. In 2022, we passed the bipartisan infrastructure, 2021, 3 years ago, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and then later the Inflation Reduction Act. And those are full of investments. They're the largest climate investments in history. But in fact, these are investments in the tools, and we all have to take up the tools. So states, counties, cities, electric utility companies, industry, they all have the tools now, but who's asking them to take them up? So there are household energy rebates that have to be adopted and administered by state government. Highway departments can take up these electric vehicle charging system funds. Cities and counties can convert to electric fleets and they can adopt climate safe building codes. School boards can use the IRA to buy electric buses. So we, in this election season, we're teaching the climate ballot. As you vote all the way down the ballot, how does each office have a role in stopping the climate crisis? And by educating a congregation, we want to prepare informed voters and get people excited about voting. And, you know, maybe when a candidate comes to their door, they will hear the question, what will you do about the climate crisis? Voting is, I think you all know, is connected to faith. As religious people, whatever the faith, we understand our stewardship role for creation, and we prioritize caring for others. And in fact, voting itself is an act of stewardship. It's how we form the world that we are leaving for the next generations. So today here in Arizona in Phoenix, I was at a press event with our ally, an organization called Arizona Faith Network. They have been running 17 cooling centers at houses of worship in Phoenix, in the Phoenix area this summer. Their director, Reverend Katie Sexton Wood, said today at this press conference that the money is running out. They have enough to get through this year, but next year, if they are relying on charity alone, on contributions, they'll only be able to have 2 cooling centers next year, as opposed to 17 now. That they've paid for the 17 with leftover ARPA funds. So, you know, in Phoenix, we've had a record 61 days over 110 degrees. We've had 39 nights, and this is, I think, even more important, especially for unhoused people, 39 nights with lows in the 90s when the average is 7 for a summer. And the people who visit these cooling centers, whether they are unhoused or they're in houses but not running their air conditioning for many reasons. These folks don't have a voice. Yesterday in Washington, D.C., the indigenous organization from Arizona called Apache Stronghold filed an appeal with the Supreme Court to save a sacred place called Oak Flat. It's a lovely place. It's an oasis in the desert environment with springs and big oak trees, and it is sacred to generations of the Apache people. That sacred land is slated to be transferred from Forest Service control to a foreign-owned mining company called Resolution Copper. And if that transfer goes ahead, that sacred land will be obliterated, leaving behind a crater 2 miles long and 1,100 feet deep. And the aquifer will be gone as well. So when that land swap happened in Congress, it was slipped in a late night must-pass defense bill. When that happened in Congress, you can bet that there were lobbyists there for the mining company. In fact, those lobbyists had been there for weeks, months, I think even years before. But sacred land does not have a lobbyist. Nature has no voice. So this is where faith communities can come together to be a voice for those in need and for nature and the climate. And often we can follow indigenous lead as we protect the places that are sacred to all of us. So that's the context that we are doing voting work in, that we are doing nonpartisan election advocacy work. So I mentioned teaching the climate ballot. That's one of the things that we are doing. We're using some tools that Mike mentioned to help our SAGE teams table after worship with voter registration, signing up for early voting, and voter pledges. You know, we need to make sure that we are relevant to public officials and that our congregations are made up of people, they're full of people who vote. We're holding some small group meetings with legislative candidates and their constituents about, you heard me talk about funding those cooling centers. And, this is the time when elected officials are most interested in talking with their constituents, when they themselves are running for office, when they are candidates. So this is an ideal time to set up those meetings. And on September 29th, we're holding a forum with candidates from both sides of the aisle for the Arizona Corporation Commission. Arizona is still burning fossil fuels, over 50% methane and coal for our electricity as a state. And so by gathering in large numbers, we will demonstrate that people of faith are concerned about the climate crisis and that we want them to consider, we want the Corporation Commission to consider how the most needy households are treated by utilities and whether they have access to electricity for their air conditioning. So if you know some people in Arizona who would like to get involved, put them in touch with me. And I mentioned that we are part of the UMC Desert Southwest Conference. So if you have folks in Nevada that might be interested, put them in touch with us too, because we'd love to talk with them. So that's the context and the work that we're doing around this election year.
So thank you, Melanie. I want to, there was a lot of meat there, but I want to point back to just one statistic she raised, that for most of us in Mountain Sky, we don't have this experience. 61 days, that's 2 months at 110 degrees plus. We've in some ways, climate change has been a little gentler to us here, a little farther north, but that really brings home the problems that we are now wrestling with. I also like the way Melanie connected that out to the broader scope beyond just voting, but also reaching out to your elected officials and having your voice heard that way. So we're going to go with A.C. Churchill, Reverend A.C. Churchill. Let me just make sure I've got it right. A.C. has been with Earth Ministries and Washington Interfaith Power and Light since 2022 as executive director, and entire bio, along with links to various things that have been raised by our previous speakers, is in the chat. So, Reverend Churchill, would you would you
Yeah,
join us,
perfect.
please?
Thanks, Tim. You're doing a great job juggling. I love your skills. Uh, hey, y'all. I am Reverend A.C. Churchill. My pronouns are they, them. I am the executive director at Earth Ministry, Washington Interfaith Power and Light. Okay, let me see if I can see my screen, see all y'all. Any Pacific Northwest Conference folks. Melanie did this. I go, what? Hey, any? Well, that's okay. We welcome you. Oh, we gotta go. I see you, Paul. That's right. That's right. I see a couple of y'all. Oh my goodness. Well, it is a joy to be with you all this afternoon. And whatever the afternoon looks like for you, I hope it has moments of what you are needing. So this kind of thoughts I want to share with you all is not just for me. It's a combination of Rashinda and myself having these really lovely conversations, in particular about the ways in which so much of our work as people of faith and people of conscience and people who are connected to creation care and the environment, so much of what we do focuses on trying to stop bad things from happening. Right? Like we got to stop this bad stuff from happening. We got to stop the extractions. We got to stop all, the harm that's being caused to the planet and the harm that's being caused to our neighbors and to ourselves. One of the things that I think sometimes we forget to do is talk about the vision of the kind of world that we want to create, which as people of faith and people of conscience, we are storytellers, y'all. We are really good at sharing stories. How do you think our faiths got passed down from person to person? Right? Before it was written down, it was shared. And then it got written down, then it got painted, and then it got created in sculpture. And our stories live in us and through us. And one of the stories that we know how to tell as people of faith and conscience, and I know that many of you know how to tell as United Methodists, is stories of hope. That there is another world possible, that there is another vision possible for the world. And so one of the visions that is possible is making voting more accessible and easy to do. And this is one of the blessings that we have in the Pacific Northwest, in the conference, but also in Washington and in Oregon. And shout out if you know other states that do this, but mail-in voting, come on, where Mary Beth, I see y'all, where are y'all? Are you Colorado? Okay. There, you know what? Mail-in voting is the way to go. And for those of you who don't have it yet, if you need it, we got to figure out how to get it for you. Because let me tell you what, it is a game changer. There's some things here in Washington and Arizona, nice. Get it, Melanie. Y'all been doing it for 30 years, 3 decades. Nicely done. There's some things in Washington, and I think Oregon too, Rashinda would have to speak to this, is that, that barriers are continuing to be removed for voting. Like you don't have to put a stamp on your ballot anymore. It used to be that you had to be able to afford a stamp. Now, stamps, not that expensive to some of us, but for others, that can cost, right? You add up things like it could be a barrier. We're all about removing the barriers. Another thing in Washington is that individuals who were convicted of felonies in 2022, as long as they are not currently serving, have had their voting rights restored. So there is some good work that's been happening in Washington on felony voter rights and also, again, Rashinda would have to talk about Oregon and others, but you can register up to the day, November 5th. You can still register on November 5th to vote. You have to go in person, register in person and vote and get your ballot, but you can register a day of. You have until 8 p.m. Pacific time to get registered and vote. Now, what does all this have to do with faith? Come on. Because our faith talks about removing barriers, removing ways in which we limit God's love and the expansiveness of God's vision for a different world, for a world that is embracing and inclusive, and a world that has a vision of not just people and planet struggling to survive, but actually to thrive. And voting is one of the ways. It's not the only way, but it's one of the ways that we get there. So this kind of piece about joy, there are two parts that I want to share with you real quick, because you got me going as a preacher, and so I'll try to wrap myself back. Is to say that Rashenda has done some amazing work to put together a blessing for the ballots. So I know in lots of different states, there are possibilities for communities to do march to the polls, get out and, everybody vote together. So if you're in a state that you have to go to the polls, consider that for your community. Marching to the polls or walking to the polls, find a friend, go together, or be those poll kind of care providers at polls like Mike was talking about. But if you're in a mail-in state, you don't get the kind of joy of standing in the line and getting the sticker like I did when I was growing up in Alabama. So make sure, but there are ways that we can honor the intentional work that we're doing when we're writing, when we're selecting our choices on a ballot. There are intentional things we can do. We can pray over stickers. Oh yeah, you're right. We do get stickers too, Melanie. There are intentional things that you can do as you're filling out your ballot. For us in Washington, we also get voter pamphlets. So we get to read through the candidates. We get to read through the ballot measures. You can read over those, pray and ask, and pray that there would be wisdom and discernment and love going through your votes. You could pray as you fill it out, as you sign it. You could pray as you deposit it. I think Rashenda's put that document in, that there are several things that you could do with your community. Again, you can't endorse candidates, but I think sometimes what we've done is, because as 501c3s, as churches, we've worried about that line so much that we just stopped talking about it. Faith communities can talk about voting. Faith communities can talk about voting in sacred spaces. They can talk about and endorse ballot initiatives and take stances on ballot initiatives, which is something that we're working on. So we're going to put the prayer in. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention, if you're in the Pacific Northwest Conference, is that one of the major things that we are working on right now is trying to stop a ballot initiative that would cause a lot of harm to our state, which is, and two of them, one of them is ballot initiative 2117. For those of you who may not know, Washington State has a Climate Commitment Act, which means it's a capture and invest. Last year was the first year, thanks Rashenda, no on 217. Last year was the first year that we got back in revenue from the CCA. And we, in the first year alone, brought in $1.8 billion. All of that money goes to green infrastructure, green energy transition. 35% of that money has to be allocated to overburdened, underserved communities. 10% of that funding has to go to tribal-led initiatives. There is a ballot initiative on our Washington State ballot in November that would repeal that Climate Commitment Act and say that Washington State could never have anything like it again. Is a capture and invest the only way that we can move towards holistic, different ways of being? No. But having the funding needed to be able to transition our systems, to be able to transition school buses across the state to electric, that they don't have to apply, but that we passed legislation this past cycle that said all school buses across the state would be electric. That's funded by the CCA, but that'll go away. So if you know somebody who lives in Washington, you know somebody who votes in Washington and they don't know about it yet, know on 2117. There's more information I could share with you, but I've been talking at you for a while. So I'm just going to share one last thing, which is our toolkit that we created. And a lot of it has basic steps. Number one, check your status, voter registration status. These voter polls get purged, y'all. You got to make sure that you're on road ready to vote. Number two, learn what's on the ballot. Number three, understand why it matters as a person of faith. And number four, get your community involved. And our toolkit has a lot of resources, but additionally, what it has in there is connections to a lot of the resources that Mike already mentioned in terms of Interfaith Power and Light's work on pulpit work, about politics in the pulpit and about matters of faith. The point of all of this is that, yeah, there are things that we got to fight, and we got to stop the harms that are being caused to a lot of the people that we love, the environment that we love. There's also a lot of good that we can do and a lot of joy that we can bring into this work. And we can bring visions of healing and wholeness and gladness, because we could choose to do nothing, but we have an opportunity to do something. And that in itself feels exciting. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, AC. I love the idea of marching together to the polls. I got like this retro 60s thing going on in my head now. That can be a lot of fun. Yes,
Tim,
Rashenda, please.
Just real quick from the Oregon, with my Oregon IPL hat on, what a joy it was to talk with AC, and we're sort of dreaming about, we're mail-in states. Can we dance to the mailbox? Can we make this joyful and inclusive and community oriented? And sort of imagining us all gathering around the drop-off location and singing a hymn or something. So so it was just really, we can, just like communion is an act of sort of repentance and confession and relationship, it's also this tremendous joyful moment. So just kind of reminding us, and I would not be a good Oregon IPL person if I didn't drop this, which is a link to, as AC is dealing with 2117 in Washington, Oregon is dealing with CCP, our climate program that got thrown out by a court and is now on its way back in. So adjustments and other kinds of adjustments. So thank you, Tim, for letting me just like pop that in. So back to you.
Yeah. So Rashenda, you guys need to come up with a hashtag like dance to the ballot, and then just get out the word and everybody does a selfie as they're dancing and dropping. So now I'm going to move over here in the Mountain Sky, and I believe Mary Beth is with the Climate Justice Task Force here in Mountain Sky, and is a force of nature, and has been instrumental in a lot of things that have been happening over here. And she's getting applause from a couple folks. Mary Beth.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you, Tim and Rashenda, for setting this up and giving us an opportunity to discuss this. And it feels like we talked about this in August, and now there's an explosion of faith election stuff. And isn't that just what we want? It's heartening. It's wonderful. Yep, I'm on the task force, and a lot of the people here in this call helped with this flyer, so that I'm going to talk about. So I'll touch what I think we have time for, but I'm not the only voice or the worker of this. There was multiple brains that made this happen. Anyway, Mountain Sky is a huge geographical conference. We have Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and Montana. And so it's always been a challenge, and we're very diverse. What we found, there were a group of us that were going to do this workshop on water rights, because we've kind of did that at annual conference. And some of the people from our rural members started saying that they were really concerned. They were seeing a lot of Christian nationalism discussion and webinars and gatherings, et cetera, et cetera. So we thought, whoa, okay. So we changed direction and decided that we needed to really push this education on this moment. And it simultaneously was happening within the conference. Reverend Betty put on a webinar, Christian Nationalism Through the Wesleyan Lens, at the end of August. And I'll show you our flyer in a minute. We're going to try to put the recording of that webinar on the flyer as a live link. And then one of the districts, we have 5 districts, and one of the district superintendents did a webinar, which is keeping Jesus out of politics, so that there could be a discussion about how to do your faith without crossing the line, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, so we created a flyer. Rashenda, could you show the flyer? And a kudos to Ingrid. It was her skills that she took all of this information that we gathered and made it look nice. She's really, really talented. She's really, really good. And she's patient too. She'll teach you how to do it if you want. So anyway, this is the flyer we created, and a lot of this stuff is stuff that you have heard about from Interfaith Power and Light, because we got your stuff, Mike, and it is on there. And so what we did is we did 3 kind of bullet things. To the left is, what does your faith say? We decided that we needed to put in the revised social principles, because those have been updated and they're more progressive. And so that's a link in there. Then a lot of stuff from the IPL, your matters of faith, things from your workshops for the pulpit and reflection guides and et cetera, et cetera. So that was that section. In the middle section, we do what can you do? And we talked about, this is straight out of IPL's recommendation, that get church members to check that their registration, research platforms and candidates, and vote. And what I heard or read an article by the Environmental Voter Project founder, and he said, research shows that the most important thing that you can do is ask, what is your voting plan? He said, when people verbalize their voting plan, he said, it increases the reluctant voters' chances of voting 80%. So he said, you don't need to persuade people of anything, just make sure that they know how they're going to vote. And so all of those links in the middle, we tried very hard to highlight issues, keep it nonpartisan, so that if you are researching and you want to know more about a topic, that's there. Most of them are climate, but some of them have other issues as well. The one that I want to draw your attention to is Project 2025, A Dangerous Proposal. This is the one that really got us moving. This was this is a document created by a nonpartisan Western Slope group of individuals who saw the Project 2025 as it emerged. This was the first time I had ever heard of it. And that link gives you links to summaries and et cetera, but that's where we felt like a lot of our motivation came from. The last section, the third section, is the pulpits. And we put in there the UMC General Board of Church and Society 2 weeks ago put out a voter's guide, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So there is a huge explosion of resources in this area. Amen, yay, and amen. It's also got the guide that Mike talked about, the guide for political activity. This is one of the clearest graphic explanations of what churches can and cannot do. And I think it's probably one of the most valuable things on this flyer, because when you look at that, then it does empower you that we can talk about issues, and we have an important call to talk about issues. So anyway, those are the 3 sections. And then if you look down at the bottom, we have done some research. Kathy Kilmer found so many of these, and as did Ingrid, where each state has resources for their specific concerns and issues and ballots and whatever. So anyway, this is something that you'll get. It'll be in Rashenda and Tim will send it out afterwards. But if we could go to the yep, this came from the General Board of Church and Society, and if you scroll down, they have what is called the Sacred Voters Pledge. It's clear at the bottom, and what they're really recommending, and is that we in our churches, and this idea came from Kathy, who's here, was set up a computer in the lobby of your church. Check the registration as people are waiting and drinking their coffee. If you have voter registration by computer, sign them up right then. And this ballot ready thing, what a resource, Mike, because that can tell people if their registration is active or not. Never heard of that before. It's a fabulous thing. Anyway, but this, if you could click on the pledge thing, Rashenda, to see what it looks like. It's basically, the other thing that I've seen on their website was, okay, it's all good. Is that people make a poster of this voting pledge, and they stand in the lobby and they ask people, are you going to vote? What's your plan to vote? And here is the church's recommendation as you vote. And if you go to the top, these are the bullets, and it asks you to think about and sign on to each one of these. And these are all things that we all just need to be reminded. And I loved what you said, Reverend AC, about as you vote, pray about this. This is a sacred act that we're doing here. Ground yourself in your faith, pray for wisdom, stand with justice, the marginalized and the oppressed. That put that lens on as you read your ballot stuff. Encourage your faith community, which means, volunteer to sit at the desk and talk to people about voting. Seek peace and reconciliation, which means we don't all agree. Try to listen with an open heart, create space, and know that we have more in common than apart. And that if we don't go into our respective corners, we have a chance of finding our common ground and holding leaders accountable. And this is the part we often forget about, is when it's all over, done and said, that we need to let them know that we're watching and that we matters and that we're following through with it. So that's in a quick, fast talk, because that's what I do best. Thing, and these links will be shared. And I would ask if there's anything with the other people who from this legislative advocacy working group who are on this call, if you have anything that you want to share, I would invite you. Now would be a good time.
Thank you, Mary Beth. I'm almost tempted to see if Rashenda and I could just pick out the key bits and pieces and print these 3 pages and set up a computer and you're ready to go. So we may, I'm throwing that idea out there. If we don't do that, we will at least get all of these links out to everyone. So you could basically do the same thing yourself, because what the speakers have managed to outline from Mike through Mary Beth is here's why and here is how you can do this and get your people out registered and out to vote and motivated to do so. So thank you all. We've got a few minutes where we're going to open things up for questions. So Rashenda.
Ingrid has her hand up too.
Well, then we'll start with Ingrid.
All right. Yes, I'm unmuted. So this is so awesome because I did a bunch of the research and found things, and I recognize some and others are new. And just as Mary Beth said, such a wealth of information. Has anyone considered setting up like a Facebook page where we could collect these things? Or I know there's websites, but people find stuff on Facebook too. So I just wanted to know if anyone has done that. No? Well, if that is an idea that, I'm volunteering to help set that up if, that needs to be done. So just let me know.
Other questions? Does anybody else have a question today? One of the speakers or somebody else on the call?
One thing that I would highlight, because I know we can talk about candidates. And so Project 2025 is somewhat problematic, except that it is not officially linked to any party. And there's denial or whatever. But so that's a cautionary tale. At some point that might become a partisan thing, but it isn't at this point. So I just wanted to say that out loud.
Yeah, let me add on to what Mary Beth said. So it is partisan, but so is climate change and everything else we're talking about. It is not tied to a particular candidate. So that's why we are in safe ground talking about that. The other thing I'll note is they have rebranded. They're no longer going by Project 2025. The new name escapes me, but I suspect if you go to the Wikipedia page or a couple other places, you can probably find the new name without too much trouble. Rashenda.
Yeah, I had a quick question for Mike. So I loved that once you went into your vote, you put in your address and it brought up like your context, and it had some resources for learning more about the ballot measures. And I know it's a bipartisan campaign, but where do those resources go? I wondered, like, are those really bipartisan resources? Are they faith resources? What is the resource button, to learn more about what's on your ballot? Where does that go?
It stays on that site, the Ballot Ready, and Ballot Ready has a team of independent researchers who spend a lot of time researching, double checking, triple checking source information, which is candidate websites, public election websites. But it's the ballot ready team that is researching and verifying all of that information. So it won't send you out to another site. It stays on ballot ready.
Thank you.
All right, so I think that gets us to the point where, well, let me ask one last question if we have one before we go through the closing part of our hour. All right, so we've got links in the chat. Most people have put their email addresses. If you don't have Rashenda's or mine, I've just added my email address so that you can get a hold of us. Rashenda's just added the links to Faith Votes, and then we'll do a follow-up email, consolidate all of this and try and give it a little structure and send that out to everybody.
Joan has a question.
Yes, Joan, I apologize.
I'm with the Climate Justice Ministries Task Force in California, Nevada conference. And we put out a newsletter monthly, and I'm beginning to work on the October one that will go out at the end of September. I'm just wondering, is climate justice, creation justice movement, what's going to go in your newsletter, Rashenda, on this sort of stuff? Is there going to be an article I can whip, basically?
So yeah, in fact, on the 18th, there's a movement cafe where we're going to talk specifically about United Methodist values in the side by side with Project 25, the platform of the Republican platform, the Democratic platform. Well, what does that look like lined up? What is the platform of the United Methodist Church, our social principles, what we say we care about over and over again? What is our energy policy? We'll have experts with us for that. And that's on the 18th. So yes, check United Methodist creationjustice.org. Will get you anywhere you want to go on that site, including sign up for the newsletters, take a look at the blog and some of the things that will come out. So that's going to be very much our focus in the next few weeks, and more things will be posted there. And yeah.
Okay. So there's going to be some
we're doing good work.
There's going to be some things I can cross post in our newsletter then.
Yes. And reach out to me or Kathy or Don if you have any questions about movement cafes or where you can get more information to make your job easier, putting together your newsletter and sharing your good stories with us too, so that we can put those in our newsletter too, because this is all about, you know, how you build momentum and energy and tell each other's stories and hear each other's stories.
Yeah, Joan, part of what we're trying to do with the Western Jurisdiction Group is actually to help the people working down in the conferences actually support each other and learn from each other to be more effective at what we're doing. So hopefully we can do some of that for you. And I'm really excited about seeing what we can pull into the jurisdiction newsletter from what you're already doing. So with that, we've got more links showing up in the chat. I'm going to offer a closing prayer. Let us pray. Creator, deliverer, light of lights. Let there be hope. Let the outcome of this election bring hope to many. Let our choices rise with justice, kindness, and peace. Let our discernment be a blessing for our neighbors. Let us bring joy to this nation. Let our neighborhoods, our families, and the whole community of creation be blessed. In this public space, with this public act, let our ballots and our faith citizenship be a mark of hope, for we are rooted in the good of the earth and the love of the divine. Amen.
Amen.
Be well, friends. Do good. Vote.
Thank you so much, Mike, for being here, and Melanie. And I know AC had to jump a little earlier, and Dawn for being a co-writer in the background, and Ingrid, all the good work you did, and for Mary Beth to Charity Roloff. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for creating
Nice to meet you all.
Good to meet you all.
Sounds great.